Tonight marks the 145th Annual Baldwin Oratorical Contest, a gift from the late D.P. Baldwin endowed an award to be given to the Wabash students who, quote, compose and pronounce the best orations. The Baldwin Oratorical Contest is one of the longest continuous running speaking contests in the nation. Judge Baldwin was a longtime trustee of Wabash College. He was well known on campus and spoke regularly, both in chapel and in the classroom. He was particularly well known for his lectures on English literature and economics. On the night of the first Baldwin Oratorical Contest in 1873, Judge Baldwin gave each of the finalists a copy of the complete works of Shakespeare, and we'll continue that tradition this evening. Tonight we'll remember Judge Baldwin by considering the theme, Improving Wabash. This year's contestants were asked to identify a problem facing Wabash College and to advocate for a specific action in response. The speeches offered by tonight's speakers answer this call through different angles and with different styles. We trust that you will find these orations thought-provoking and enjoyable. We are pleased to have with us an excellent panel of judges for the competition, all of whom have the ability to implement these improvements that are being proposed tonight. Our first judge is Scott Feller. He is the Lloyd B. Howell Professor of Chemistry and the Dean of the college. Dean Feller has been at Wabash College since 1998, and his administrative responsibilities relate to the faculty and academic programming at the college. We are also pleased to welcome Kendra Cooks, the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer of the college. A native of Crawfordsville, Ms. Cooks began her employment with Wabash College in 2017. Her administrative responsibilities relate to college finances. Our final judge is Mark Welch, who is the Associate Dean of Students. Welch graduated as part of the Wabash class of 1999 and returned to Wabash in 2012. His administrative responsibilities relate to student life at Wabash. Please join me in expressing our thanks to the judges for volunteering their time and lending their expertise to this contest this evening. Before finalists will present their speeches now to determine this year's Baldwin Oratorical Contest. Our first speaker tonight is Ian Gale. Ian is a freshman from Phoenix, Arizona, and is exploring his academic options. He enjoys reading and writing. Ian's oration is entitled, For the Sake of Our Brothers.
Good evening. I'm extremely grateful to you all for opening your ears toward the boy who has delivered nearly everything in his life extemporaneously, yet for the first time has ventured out of his own habitual comfort to prepare notes. Like many of the great chapel talks and Wabash orations of the past, it is imperative that I include a heartfelt anecdote concerning my initial interactions with Wabash College. So, in the midst of a rather unsavory senior year of high school, I was approached by a well-dressed recruiter about the possibility of attending a small, all-male liberal arts institution located in what, for all I knew, was Mayberry. Now, I'm a true fan of fishing holes, creeks, and grain, but I much prefer the picture windows provided by Winslow Homer with his pastoral life to 4 years of my own, which might be spent in some exotic locale. Moreover, according to my then recently legalized mind, female presence in the student body was an absolute necessity of my academic achievement. Further reason came when, the summer after high school, I had read in a biography that the eminent Ezra Pound had taught a course in romance languages at the college before being given the swift boot for suspected carousal. Well, if it was not good enough for old Ez, it certainly was not for me. Surely, I reasoned to myself, this cannot be where you end up. There are bigger and better things than a so-called brotherhood. Yet, as with many of the Lord's blessings, the path was illuminated before I had time to strike a match. Wabash, in fact, became my only answer, making its virtues known to someone who had struggled much more than the usual student to achieve a place in the world. I was granted some funds, packed up my books in an icebox, and went by automobile opposite the manifest destiny, arriving on a sweltering August day. Having settled in, the newly assembled student body filed into the grand hallways of the Pioneer Chapel. I sat in the balcony facing the podium, feeling pious. From then on, I was a brother. Now, I had grown up with only a sister. I wanted for no brothers. Again, the Lord thought otherwise, and I was shown what a brother could be. Here, men are not bashful of excelling academically or otherwise. Rather, they prod one another like Spartan youth to do their very best in and out of the classroom, holding one another up to a considerable standard of excellence. In the midst of a setback, the brothers set to action immediately to right their wrongs, rarely pitying themselves, but ever disciplining. Success is fostered by the warmth of the open and engaging professors, and there exists a staggering number of ways to be included in this great Wabash community. These and a host of other qualities solidified my belief in the seemingly perfect culture of Wabash, and the same fervor which I had originally used to dissuade myself of the merits of Wabash was now being used to exclaim, "Wabash always fights," at random intervals. Yet no sooner had I come to this realization than tragedy struck. We had lost her. For reasons unknown to any of us, our friend, nearing the finale of his Wabash travails, chose for himself a different route altogether. The loss of our comrade and student was a definite blow to each heart. As somewhat of a panic arose amongst the student body, now one less, due to immense confusion. Amidst the overwhelming sorrow and uncertainties, a question came to her. What could Wabash have done? In a maximum effort to provide a solution, we were bombarded with assorted seminars and presentations concerning the necessity of mental health and our ability to share emotions even as men, as well as with a ceaseless promotion of the resources available to any of our mental needs. Meanwhile, the college became peppered with little messages to our brother. The chat was filled. Football games were played in his honor. Shirts were printed. A gloom settled upon it. The once fierce scarlet now appeared a darker shade. In this famous Wabash spirit, each of us chose to pursue a certain course of action in response to the tragedy. However, there lies a mistake in this process. Whilst with good intentions, we all sought to understand the meaning of the misfortune, to console one another, and prove our dedication to the memory of our friend. We as Wabash students seemingly forgot what it is to be a Wabash man. Each little seminar concluded with the motto, "Wabash always fight." But no one wanted to fight any more. No one knew what to fight against. Perhaps it was even because of this fighting spirit that our brother hid himself from us. Many of us have become enmeshed in more pitiable aspects of grief, giving ourselves up, both physically and mentally too. Many of my fellow students began to skip class and comport themselves in a way unfitting of the memory of our brother, much less of a Wabash man. The various mental health presentations, unfortunately, added nothing but a deeper sense of the depression already infusing the student life. I was rather surprised by the amount of time and effort spent by the college to reinforce the sadness of the event. We became weighed down, not just by the hardship of losing someone, but by the constant reminder of it, and so began to disregard the virtues of good men. In a sort of perverse way, the loss of a Wabash student became a reason to not be a good one. What Wabash could have done? Unresolved. But we know what Wabash must do. Wabash must maintain its values, its traditions, the very ones which enticed me to attend college here. We cannot sacrifice these to grief. It is necessary to understand that the muscle will be strained, and it must have rest to grow. But there must also be a continuous progression forward. no matter how slow, never lingering on the past for longer than is necessary. We at present partake in a communion that is 187 years old, one that has experienced tragedy in the past and will again. But our culture is one which presses on into a stronger union, into a stronger consciousness, a stronger self-assurance. And fortunately for our brother, here at Wabash College, he will not be remembered for his death. In the times when I've spoken to others, student and faculty alike, regarding him, he was the football guy, number 32, a well-built, clean-minded, serene presence to his friends, a Spanish speaker. This is our brother. This we can rest in and move forward with. We owe it to him and to ourselves. So Wabash always fights. But sometimes Wabash must make peace with the past and carry on. And before we fight, let us remember for what and for whom we fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Our second speaker tonight is Dalton Bashan. Dalton is a senior from Brownsburg and is a rhetoric major with a business minor. He is a member of Lambda Chi Alpha, and he is involved in CIBE, TEDx Wabash College, and the Sphinx Club. Dalton's speech this evening is entitled Student Union for the 200-Year Reunion.
Good evening, Wabash. So first, I'd like to ask everybody to just take a second and think about a problem that you know about on this campus and how it might affect you. So really that second was just for me to take a deep breath, relax myself. But now that I've got you thinking about different problems, one main problem on this campus that I know many students have been talking about recently is the lack of a student union center. So with the 200-year reunion coming up, why not have a student union? The students are all looking for somewhere where we can come together, central on campus, and do a variety of different things. Throughout my time as president of Lambda Chi Alpha, I was involved in a lot of different meetings with our third-party vendor, Sasaki. Sasaki's been coming to campus, meeting with different leaders on campus, faculty, and other students to hear what we need for these renovations for the bicentennial. And throughout conversations with them, other leaders on campus, and students, the student union is one of the big needs that the students need and want. So first, I'm going to talk about kind of what we have on campus, the purposes that they have, and then dive into kind of how we can restructure what we have to make it fit for the student union center. So we all know about the Lilly Library and the history it has to this campus. It's right in the middle of campus. Eli Lilly's head's right there. But we touch it every time we go up and down the steps. And we've added these pop-up classrooms, and they're great. Only during the day, though. At night, QSC takes them up. They're unavailable to students, and it takes away that area for students to collaborate and think together. We have a lot of classrooms in the back hallways where students used to go and work on projects, CIB projects, different things like that. But now, Dr. McKinney and his Legos take up all that space. So, Dr. McKinney, we really appreciate the computer science, but your Legos are taking away from our study. So, there's a lot of good spaces in the library, but they don't completely work for all the students. There's not a lot of whiteboards, chalkboards for students to come together, to collaborate, to deliberate with each other, to work on different projects for different, whether that's academics, CIB, WDPD, mental health committee, different things like that. So now that we understand kind of what the library has and how it's great, but it doesn't really work for the way that our students like to operate and think together, let's look at the Spark Center. So the Spark Center is mostly known for the independent dining. And in the basement, we have the bookstore, a bunch of offices, And even on the main floor, we still have some classrooms, but they're really only used once a week when Dean Welch decides to have an RA or president's meeting. IFC uses it, the bachelor, but besides that, they sit empty. And so, once again, there's a lot of space that could be used central to campus, but it's just not being utilized in the right way. So now, where would the student union go? Because we talk about it being central to campus. So why not just go ahead and completely get rid of Wolcott and Morris, renovate the Spark Center? So now you're probably thinking, well, where are the independents going to eat? Well, we have this nice piece of land where 310 Crawford used to be and a group of students used to live. So you could build a new independent dining hall right there just for them. It's by all the new housing for the independents, and it is specific just for independent eating, and Bon Appetit can have more of their own space and not sharing it with the bookstore and different things like that. And so now that Wolcott and Morris are gone, we renovate the Spark Center. And so what does that renovation look like? And what does the student union consist of? So by blowing it up, one of the big focuses for the Student Union Center would be co-working space. We talk at Wabash a lot about our alumni network, how Wabash prepares you for after college, and a lot of alumni and millennials rave about co-working space in the workforce. And so if we're truly trying to prepare our students for that workforce, why do we have nowhere on campus that is like a co-working space? We have Fusion 54 just off campus, but it's only limited to CIBE and WDPD students. So why not bring something central to campus that all students can utilize, come together, deliberate, and collaborate together? Also on campus, we don't have anywhere for somebody to just go by and grab a bite to eat, whether it's on their way to class, late at night, different things like that. So why not bring a Chick-fil-A, a Chipotle, something that's not Bon Appetit ran, but an outside vendor where students can actually use their meal swipes. And so some of you might be wondering, well, Greek students don't have meal swipes, it's only independents. Well, Greek students actually can purchase meal swipes as part of their food plan, but it's not something that the college advertises and many students don't know about. And also, not many students besides the independents actually use their student ID on campus, but with the increase of the changes in the athletic facilities, of that actually becoming a necessity, more students are going to have their IDs on them, and so it would not be a big burden for students. And also, a lot of people might be thinking, well, what about Wally's? We just built this nice bar right in the middle of campus. Alumni love it. Students go there. Well, so by renovating Sparks, we can actually keep Wally's where it is. And to kind of brighten up the atmosphere within Wally's, why not add some pool tables and ping pong tables? We talk about how great our dorms are, our new dorms are, and how modern they are. Well, a lot of them have something like a ping pong or pool table or something like that in a common area for them. So why not brighten up Wally's in the Student Union Center? And also, a lot of alums love coming back to Wally's, and if a lot of students are in the student union, then it'll help with that alumni engagement and students can meet them there. Also, with the addition of pool table or ping pong table and brightening up Wally's, it adds to just a friendly, competitive environment, which could potentially even lead to some intramurals. So also, I've talked a lot about how serious the student union would be. Co-working space, students working on class projects, meeting with alumni, all that. But also just having a place for students to come and just relax and hang out. We don't have anywhere really on campus to do that. The brewery is probably the closest thing. And so we all know IMA does their wing night on Monday night for Monday Night Football. So what's stopping IMA and even IFC coming together in a student union to have Monday Night Football together to bring students from Lambda Chi, Sigma Chi, Fiji, Wolcott, or new Wolcott and Morris, College Hall, all those different places together in one place that is central on campus and open all the time. And also with the Wally's and it being in the Student Union Center, on senior council we like to do what we call business and brews. So sometimes we just like to have a nice beer and talk about our business and plan the semester out for senior council. And so having Wally's in the Union Center would be awesome for students and even alumni. Just come back, talk about their business, have a beer, collaborate, and discuss together. So with the addition of a student union and it being right next to the library, central to campus, open all the time, access to students, you don't have to worry about the QSC, you don't have to worry about Dr. McKinney and his Legos. It's a student-run union, which is what we pride ourselves in. This college, we pride ourselves in being a student-run college. So why not open this up, give our students an area to work together, to collaborate, to deliberate, and better Wabash as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalton. Our next speaker is Benjamin Manahan. Ben is a sophomore from Monticello, Indiana. He is a rhetoric major and a business minor and is the vice president of the investment club on campus. Ben's oration is entitled, "Can 10 Minutes Save Wabash?"
Make sure this works right.
Second, suicide is now the second leading cause of death for college students. In addition to this statistic, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has found that another 8% of full-time students have seriously considered suicide. 2.4% of students have made a plan for it, and 1% of students have made an attempt at this. The facts and figures dealing with college students and mental health and suicide don't stop here. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, 1 in 4 have a diagnosable mental illness, 40% don't seek help, 50% feel so anxious they struggle with their schoolwork, and 80% just feel overwhelmed by their responsibilities. As a student myself, I can confidently say that us Wabash men are not invincible to any of these. We go through hard times, feel anxious, feel sad, and feel alone. Let me draw your attention to that last word, alone. See, being alone or feeling alone doesn't necessarily mean you have a mental illness, and I don't think anyone here would argue against that. That's why I'd like to stress the importance of this speech for all students here at Wabash. This isn't just a call to action on improving mental health. This is a call to action on improving the lives of the entire Wabash community. In the next several minutes, I am to provide my solution that will better the lives of the Wabash community through research development and support by the use of a 10-minute mandatory meeting for all incoming freshmen. But before getting to what will help Wabash, first we must understand why this change is even necessary. So I'll start with mental illness and the stigma that follows it, as well as address the stress issues that come with being a student at a college like Wabash. First, let's talk about the stigma. In 1999, a report came out from the U.S. Surgeon General, David Satcher, in which he stated one of the biggest barriers to mental health was the stigma behind it. While the overarching stigma associated with mental health and counseling is important, I urge everyone to also focus on self-stigma as well. This is when people believe they themselves are weak or damaged because of an illness, in this case, a mental illness. An article from the World Psychiatric Association calls this the why-try effect, which is often accompanied with low self-esteem and low self-efficacy. When individuals establish this stigma within themselves, it creates a barrier between them and counseling, support, or help of any kind in reality. The stigma and self-stigma around counseling and mental illness hasn't quite just broke yet here, or at any other college for that matter. However, I'd like to draw our attention to a few traits of Wabash that differ us from the majority of colleges. See, at an all-male institution with a very tight-knit community, most of us are not new to stressful times, decisions, and choices that we have to make, and many of us will probably not have to rely on the counseling center during our time here. While talking to Kevin Swain, one of our counselors here, he stressed this idea that while many students don't have the wish or need to necessarily talk with a counselor, many often deal with stressful situations and decisions due to the culture and expectations we take on as students here at Wabash. He claims often we talk about success and graduation, yet often we don't normalize these difficult choices that students are often faced with here. At a school where more than 50% of the students are in athletics, a difficult choice that many, including myself, may have gone through is the process of quitting athletics at Wabash. This process and others such as considering the idea of staying a fifth year at Wabash can take a heavy toll on students and can just seem harder to talk about, whether it be with your friends or with your family. However, Kevin says that just simply talking to someone about it, whether that be with your professor, your advisor, your coach, or even the counselors, who play a big role in relieving a lot of this stress. Because stress is in every college, and especially here at times, and everyone encounters it, whether that stems from a mental health issue or the decision to stay an extra year at your college. This is where my 10-minute solution comes into play. So how do we combat the stigma and self-stigma while also helping students go through especially stressful Wabash situations? My answer to this is a 10-minute mandatory meeting for all incoming freshmen with one of our counselors during their first semester. While I personally think this could be paired very well with tutorial here at Wabash, I'll leave the overall structuring to the administration. But no matter how it's implemented, it's very important and crucial to understand and let the students know that in this short meeting, the conversation may go wherever the student chooses. The purpose of the meeting is not to look for a flaw in the student, but to allow each student to briefly experience the counseling center individually in whatever way that may be. The initial result of this will be that every student will not only know where the counseling center is, but will have some sort of experience in talking and speaking with the counselors here. The second benefit is that the student will hopefully engage in some sort of productive conversation with one of our counselors, whether it be about themselves at Wabash, how to deal with their friends with a mental illness, or just other general questions or concerns as a student in college. This implementation into the freshman curriculum will work to destigmatize mental illness in the process of getting help, because through this experience, within 4 years, every student will have experienced the counseling center in some sort of way. Additional benefits that can follow a change like this include more people knowing how to help someone with a mental health issue, as well as students being more likely to talk about their issues, whether that ends up being with the professor, the advisor, or the coach. For a brief moment, I would like to call your attention to data done from a study by several professors such as Cheryl King and Daniel Eisenberg at the University of Michigan in 2013. See, in the green box, they found that 12.1% of individuals would not seek help from a professional service because of the stigma around getting help and their mental illness. Not because they didn't have time, not because they think their issue's minor, not because they already talk about it with friends and family. No, 1 out of 10 don't simply go because of this stigma. Additionally, you'll see in the yellow box that they found that 66.2% don't go just because they believe their issue isn't big enough or is minor. And while this is true and very fair for a lot of students, especially here, they also found that the more heavier alcohol drinkers tended to answer with this. This is why these 10-minute moments don't just pertain to mental health. The ability to eventually have every student experience the counseling center has benefits that will continue to spread as time goes on. One student might actually decide to get help at some point because of this. One student might help another. One student might talk rather than drink, or one might just enjoy their college experience a little bit more because they decided to stay that extra year. Now, I know it seems like a lot to think that, for instance, this year's class of 285 young men can all go through a 10-minute meeting with our 2 counselors in a single semester. But when we break this down into the semester for our 2 current counselors, we see that it would only take 1 hour and 30 minutes to get through these conversations, and that's for 1 week. Whether or not this seems like a lot is dependent upon yourself as an individual. Nonetheless, some people will make the claim that these meetings can take away time from someone who desperately needs the counseling center, and instead will give it to someone who very well might never need to rely on the counselors here. And while this is valid to some degree, let me offer you this rebuttal. A business creates a new product. While this product is, While this product is successful and profitable, it also interferes with the original product that made the business who they are and successful in the first place. Does this business dump the new idea to allow the first to continue on its path? In most cases, I would argue no. I would argue that this business will embrace the new product and expand the business to accommodate for both products and, in return, both benefits. Now, is this really different in terms of Wabash and mental health? If 10 minutes can really make that much of a difference, why not accommodate for this change while still supporting the initial goal of the counseling center? At the end of the day, it comes down to the question of opportunity cost. Do you want to create a better life and experience for all students on campus, or save a few dollars in salary expenses? And while this proposal is not perfect by any means, it might not be the perfect fit for Wabash. As Kevin and I both agree, this is the start of a conversation that needs to be had. According to the National Institute on Mental Health, suicide rates have been increasing at a steady rate for the past 20 years and is up nearly 30% in that same time frame. It is the second most common form of death behind unintentional injury, for not just college students, but the ages from 10 to 34. See, this isn't just an issue in high school. It's not just a college issue, it's not just an adult issue. This is an issue that stems deeply within our society, and frankly, I'm tired of it. And this is why I stand before you today. Because I hate hearing about an 11-year-old girl who feels like she doesn't belong on this earth. I hate hearing that my friend, 45 minutes north, feels the need to drink rather than talk about a situation. I'm tired of my heart sinking when I see the faces and reactions of those closest to the victims. The tears of a heartbroken mother, the sunken face of a depressed father, the confused and longing eyes of a younger sibling. So I ask you, Wabash College, how willing are you to give up 10 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Our final speaker tonight is Joey Lenkey. Joey is a senior from Indianapolis and is a biology major with a minor in chemistry. He is a member of Fiji and the Sphinx Club, and he is also involved with social dance, TEDx Wabash College, and the Halfway Home where he works in town. Joey's speech is entitled, "How Could Data Improve Our Diminishing Social Life?"
Is that here? Yeah. Oh.
So Wabash, I have a confession to make. While I was preparing this speech, I never used data and fun in the same sentence. So while I enjoy the benefits of data, like allowing me to surf the web or playing my favorite video game, whenever I hear, and some of you guys might be like this as well, whenever you hear the word data, your mind already starts to want to turn off. And if you're like me, it kind of looks something like this, right? You all we see is a giant wave of numbers and math and graphs, and it's just way over our head, and we're going to drown. And so what I'm here today is to describe to you that data is actually not so scary. And in fact, it can be one of the best ways we can improve Wabash now and future generations to come. And especially in certain areas that I'm especially passionate about, and you'll see why here soon. And so I believe that as Wabash College continues to be competitive and try to be competitive with other liberal arts colleges, we need to model ourselves on other very successful, highly competitive organizations. And last summer I had an internship at IU Health that kind of showed me who that model might be. And so in IU Health, it's a hospital, right? And they run a business. And the business is their customers, is their patients. And they're trying to do anything they can to get their patients to come back and to retain it. So it's very similar to a college who's trying to attract and keep students as well. So what IU Health taught me is they have what's called this triple threat. And there's three things that they're using data for to keep track and make themselves competitive. And one thing is health outcomes, and this is the most obvious. So if you guys get in a fender bender and break your arm and you go to the hospital, do they take care of you? Do you end up a month later back in the hospital for a surgery? If so, that's the data that goes into health outcomes. But then think about it. If you go in there and you pay these expensive bills because doctors go and ask for 5 different x-rays on things you don't think is necessary. So cost is a factor as well. That could deter people from coming back to the hospital. And then this last thing is care. So imagine yourself have great outcomes, great value, but while you were there, you had a nurse that was just really, really rude to you. And you never want to go back to that same hospital. So how could we quantify the care aspect in the hospital setting? So I was thinking, okay, very good similarities between hospital and colleges, retention rates. So I wondered, how can we do this for Wabash? And I got these pictures on our website. And so what I found is our student outcomes are incredible. the data shows we're second ranked in alumni. We have 9 of the top 20 rankings in the Princeton Review. On top of that, our value is just up there as well. We have 98% of people getting financial aid, and the return on investment is outrageous. It's awesome. But I kept coming back to this same question. What is the care aspect that we're keeping track of? And so, while I kept thinking about this, I wondered what was missing. So it's not a hospital bed that we're talking about. We're talking college. That's 4 years. And there's more to life than just studying, right? And arguably our best memories come outside of the classroom. So I went back to the alumni here. And the alumni here they tell about the great professors, awesome connections, academic rigor, but they don't spend time talking about that. They talk about the stories. And it's the stories of packing the Chadwick court full, selling out every week. They talk about chapel talks being attended. No one would dare miss a chapel talk. It's talking about these parties where they actually busk in girls. There's so many different areas that these alumni get excited to talk about. And for me, it felt like something was missing. And so that comes to the problem I'm proposing to you guys today. And it's the social life. Over my past 4 years, I've seen it decline. And social life I describe here is kind of those social interactions, those fun, those getting involved on campus. And for example, to describe this, if the past 4 years, what I've seen is on the weekends, people are leaving campus. They're going to other schools to party. They're going home on the weekends. And I challenge any of you guys on a Saturday afternoon or evening to drive around campus. See how many cars are missing from the parking lots. The next thing is closed rooms. So I'm a Fiji, and for the past 4 years, we've had this like closed door policy where you walk around and it doesn't feel like a fraternity. It starts to feel like a hotel, and there's no brotherhood events going on. And the last thing is the low event attendance. Think back to all the most recent chapel talks. How many people have been there? Lunch department talks. How many people have been there? And then like the national acts, the presidential guests that come in. What's been the attendance? It's gradually dropped every single year. And so, why is this happening? Well, there's a lot of reasons. It's kind of a wicked problem to think about it. And for me, I think we have this mantra here that, well, we're way too busy, right? And that could be a cultural thing we've developed here. That could also be something that we're recruiting for. We're recruiting for people that are overly driven, overly focused on academics, that they don't want to branch out. Maybe it's a risk management. No one wants to throw a party because they could get in big trouble, or they don't have the cost to throw a party or event. Maybe it's we're not having enough events, or the events we do have is that people aren't going to, so it's not getting student feedback on attending those social events. And the last thing, maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe we have video games and cell phones, and just our generation just doesn't want to get out and meet new people. So this is a wicked problem. And so how can we determine the root cause is kind of that big question we want to solve. With this wicked problem, how can we figure out and find that root cause to solve? And so that brings me back to my IU Health and data. And so with data, what I'm thinking is we ask for this macro data, this big data. And this is something that I think the school should provide. So these are things like student involvement, using the surveys, the sophomore interviews, using freshman and senior surveys to get, are they getting involved? Do they enjoy their time while they're involved? Using those surveys, actually taking attendance and recording that and presenting it and having it in the database that students can access. And then retention rates. Are people leaving after their freshman year because they don't enjoy it? So once we have this big database, we can fine tune it and find the micro data. And really, that's based on specific groups. So whether that's clubs, there are people actually saying they're involved in clubs they say they are. Fraternities, IMA, or the International Student Association, are these people getting left behind because they're not having the same social experience? And then also the target lunches and then chapel talks. So kind of figuring out this micro data and then basing it off that macro, kind of in tandem, figuring out what this root cause is. So with that, what can we do? And so I broke this up into 3 parts, the administration and faculty. What can you guys do? Well, we're amongst the Giant Steps campaign, and there's so much effort and money going into these outcomes and these value-based. But what about the social aspect? They can't solve our social issue. we need student involvement into that giant steps to make sure we take care of that care aspect. So we need student voice in there. Students, we need to demand that data from the school. Have a big database where we students can access and solve these big problems. And then lastly, we kind of need to change our lens on how we look at social life here. We need to figure out new ways to collect data, whether that's one person that sits in the back of the chapel and counts every head at a chapel talk, or counting how many times you have a party in your fraternity in a semester. Last semester, it was 1 for Fiji, so keeping track of these is how we can make improvements over time. So what's the potential outcomes? Like I said, if we start tracking this progress now, we can be on the front end and make sure we're getting better and not falling short. Because right now, we don't know where we stand with our social life. With that data, we can start to find groups that are being left behind. Like I said, maybe there's a certain fraternity that doesn't get the funding or experience to have that other fraternities do. And lastly, we need to craft specific solutions to eliminate the waste. So what I mean by that is, are we having these national acts, all these events on campus that we're putting so much money and time into that students aren't going? So using data, we can fine-tune our allocations financially and make the best of both worlds for our school and for social life here on campus. And so lastly, Wabash, we are going in the right direction for outcomes and value. But I don't want us to forget about that care aspect and making sure we're having fun. We only have 4 years here to change our lives. So why not have a little fun along the way? Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. Our judges will now confer on the speeches and be back shortly with their decision. While they deliberate, we'll open the floor to any questions. So if Joey, you're already up here, but the other three of you want to join me on stage, we all. Alright, so the floor is open to questions of anyone wants to ask the first. Doctor.
Then I've heard this suggestion before, that maybe we get every student in counselor's office. How did you work the math with the 200 and some students, 10 minutes each, 2 counselors, an hour and a half? What, this is
It's an hour and a half a week. I may have,
Oh,
I kind of put the week part at the end.
that helps.
Yeah, it's an hour and a half
Okay.
a week for a single semester.
Per
For this
counselor.
class size, and this year, that's what it's come out to.
Gotcha. Okay, that's helpful.
Yes.
I had a question for Ian. Yeah, right. Hi. So, addressing a couple points that you brought up in your speech, specifically discussing the seminars that take place, the deliberations surrounding mental health, those information sessions, and citing those as inadequate. What are you proposing instead of those? Or what are you proposing in terms of altering those in order to make those more productive for students? Because it's a problem, and you both of your speeches acknowledge that. So what do we do in the face of this issue in order to move forward if what we're doing right now isn't sufficient?
For the latter half of your question, in altering the presentations, we cut down on them. The data I collected was just from Wabash. And a lot of this was unprompted. I would hear them say, they said, man, this is depressing. Why are we having this meeting? So I think what's really wanted, desired for the student body is just to reduce the number, because we understand the problems. And the change, this applies more to the former half of your question, the change is more of an individual change. I definitely agree with everything that the mental health department says, and we should be able to have access to different options. But overall, it's more of an individual thing, you know, and it's up to us to bring ourselves to it, and up to us to keep an eye on one another.
So you're proposing that the administration take a step back?
Yes.
Joey, who would you propose to do the data collection for what you're proposing?
Oh, say again?
Who do you think should do the data collecting?
I think it's twofold. So the administration has a lot of the retention rates, kind of these, where they put a lot of money in, they kind of, I think they have data, but they're not releasing it for students for privacy reasons. I'm sure they have their reasons, but I think twofold, like students can definitely kind of take grab of their own clubs, of their own fraternities, living units. But in terms of the administration, I think it's a tandem, maybe like a shared resource that you can put into the database and then we can add to, students can add to. And kind of having this one thing that if someone has some free time and they want to go, what's going on with the campus right now? Let's do some querying, I think that's the word they use, where you combine different data points and then kind of breaking it down from there. So we can kind of solve things that way. Does that make sense? Yes.
For Ian, so you're answering that question with saying that like we need to push more like a like growth from the individuals. How do you do that without pushing for some sort of change? Like I feel like I guess I wasn't here this past semester, so I wasn't able to understand it from the students' perspectives here. But how do you elicit individual growth without doing anything about it?
I think it's a similar solution that was proposed in a different speech, and how 10 minutes to say Wabash. There should be, I think, at least one sort of student and faculty-wide solution, maybe in terms of a meeting or a presentation sort of, so you can limit it to that. Because otherwise it needs to be prompted from the individual and, fostered by the student body. I think that's really the only way that it can be handled in that sort of.
So are you saying that like students should organize their own sort of like organizations or class meetings or student body meetings versus like a school organizing that?
I guess when I say individual, it's more of like a stiff upper lip, bootstraps kind of thing. So just, not to degrade any sort of aid that's entering into it, but just kind of do it for yourself, because that's what Wabash was founded on. It's a bunch of people doing it for themselves, but they also came together as brothers to help each other out when they just absolutely couldn't do it.
Thank you.
I have a question for Dalton. How might we encourage students to be involved in planning a student union process when we know that a major building, as probably you've learned in your meeting society, it's going to take a long time. So I would liken it to the example of, when the Martindale renovation happened. I mean, in terms of campus building, that was an insanely fast timeline, and it was still like about 18 months, right? But we were able to at least say to freshmen, this is going to be here when you're a senior. That may not be the case with something that's as big as you're proposing. How can we bring in student voices so that we have the best student center for the 200 reunion, but knowing that there's a kind of shifting, right? That students are only here for 4 years at a time.
Yeah, I think that kind of ties along with like a transition with like with officers within fraternities. So like we talk a lot, like right now with Lenkey, we're talking about renovations for our house. And I was a part of all those this starting conversation. But now I'm not an officer anymore, and it's our new president and our new officers and our new house manager. So I think a big part of that, like if we're going to keep fraternity presidents and fraternity RAs in those conversations with society, then it's an important transition that when, for myself, I transition out, I'm feeling part of the role of the new president in on, hey, this is what we've talked about, this were like some of the ideas we talked about, these were some ideas that were shut down. And just keeping that conversation between those leaders outside the meetings, keeping those strong, will then continue to keep those conversations inside strong as well. And then also just having that base of Sasaki or somebody to continue to like relay that message on. Same thing with us as a fraternity. We have our alumni board, and they're the kind of base that we use year in and year out as things change. Like I don't know what was happening 5 years ago. And so they can remind us like, hey, this is how it used to be. And they see that change over time. And so I think Sasaki can really add that value as well as the kind of officer transition from year to year.
Yes.
This question's for Dalton. How do you see Fusion 54 and the proposed student union kind of coexisting, or is one going to replace the other? How do you see those two, or does Fusion 54 need to be open to all students as well?
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I don't think a student union would like completely get rid of Fusion 54 because it is nice to kind of have like that off-campus like getaway, and it is a lot smaller, and it's kind of more specified. I think it's great for like CID and WDPD, and then Career Services uses it a lot for alumni networking events. So I think being able to have those specific events there can still really add value and it wouldn't go to waste. Whereas like, I don't think you would necessarily have a big networking event in the student union setting.
Fair point.
Yes.
For Dalton. So you're gonna lose 2 independent buildings with the renovation of the Spark Center, correct? So assuming you're gonna face some backlash from the independents and not really from the fraternity side, how do you plan on appeasing them, I guess?
Yeah, so obviously with getting rid of, I think it's like 80-something beds in those 2 buildings, you obviously have to come with building new dorms. And so that kind of goes along with Dr. Drury's point about like this being a long process. We can't just throw up new dorms overnight. And the college loves to build independence new dorms, so I don't see them hesitating to do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question for Joey. I would agree in the sense that the social aspect of campus is a part that's been lagging behind the other aspects we have with academics and athletics. And a problem that myself as a social chair and all the other social chairs run into is a lack of funding and risk management. What are some ideas that you could have from administration or students to help, one, with risk management and the large amount of people that we might have together and the little funding that we do have?
Great question. If I had the answer, I feel like we'd have way more parties on campus in that regards. So, I mean, no, that's a good point to bring. I mean, this is a wicked problem, and kind of breaking down like what concerns is your fraternity has, and I guess what specific concerns I'm trying to think of, like what type of risks are you mainly worried about, and then how you can use the school's resources, police officers, or kind of having that conversation with the school to figure out other ways to have like someone mentioned a prom, like a Wabash is small enough that we could have a high school like prom here, and maybe that's a liability lessons off the fraternity hands and kind of goes back to the school. Maybe that's the best way. I don't know, there's so many different things that I don't know the answers to.
Hey, I have one question for Joey. So you talk a lot about the data and data collection, which is, I feel like more of your presentation is, but when I think of Wabash, I think a lot of like the meetings that a lot of students or faculty will go to, where they're an hour long, and for an hour you just discuss the problem, and the only time the meeting actually ends is because it's 1 o'clock and you have to go to your 1:10s. There's not really an action plan set in stone, there's not really next steps. So hypothetically speaking, let's say you have 5 years worth of data, and you're coming back, you've graduated, you've worked at IU Health, and you're looking at the state and you're like, how can we actually act on that? So this is more of an outside question, but like, let's say you have the data, what are your first steps to do to say, let's say the Landon High House just isn't showing up for something else? How do you approach that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Honestly, first thing I'm gonna say is form a committee. But we've heard that 1,000 times. But having someone from each living unit, every club, or not every club, but every organization, I guess, big organization, coming together and kind of brainstorming, okay, here's what I'll do for my homework, to give you that microdata, and then kind of coming together and then brainstorming ideas. So kind of having like a business analyst within your living unit that loves to do this stuff and can offer advice, and then presenting it to the house and seeing what the house has feedback for. Like, here's the numbers, guys. This past semester, we had 2 Friday Brotherhood events and 1 party for the semester. What can we do differently? And then when people see the numbers, people kind of like, oh crap, let's change something. But right now we're in this like limbo stage where we don't know what's going on, and no one's taking the time to be straight up and be like, this is what we've done so far. So a committee, it comes to mind. I don't know, there's stuff. Yes?
This question's for Benjamin.
Yeah.
So you're proposing the 10-minute meeting for freshmen, right, in those first couple months. So my question was, thinking about the additional stresses and anxieties, homesickness that people face throughout their college experience and how it kind of compiles. You talked about being an athlete and making those tough choices. Like, this isn't just a first semester freshman year thing, this is a life thing. So why specifically that point as the intervention point?
In terms of freshman first semester, for me, it seemed like, I don't want to say easiest, but in terms of time, it's very doable, and that's one of the words I use in my speech. It's doable, and within 4 years, even though maybe everyone didn't solve their issue within this 10-minute thing, I think the goal is to give them this experience, to know that they can go to the counselors, that they don't have to be afraid to go into there, or they don't have to be afraid to speak is really kind of what the point argues. I think there's definitely a point to be said that, like, if this was implemented, why not have every class do it? Because some guys are going to go without it, which kind of goes to the point that I think you bring up. I guess overall, I'd say just with having 2 counselors, I think we're limited to our abilities at the moment. So I just see it as, having these freshmen come in that first semester, having this initial experience sets them up to not feel as afraid to go back further. I hope that answered the question. I think it's well.
We're having a hard time deciding.
For Benjamin, so when you think about Wabash, and something that is very characteristic of the Wabash team is that there's so many people on campus that care about students, care about each other, and this feels very true amongst the vast majority of staff and faculty. So when you think about, you could getting freshmen 10 minutes in front of someone on campus who cares about them, why did you choose the counselors?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and I don't know if you remember back to the speech, somewhere near the conclusion I said this might not be the best fit. The initial idea, I think, itself holds a lot of power to talk more about this. Are the counselors the best place to start with? When I was talking to Kevin Swain, one of the things he said is, it might be a good idea to initially talk about this and then broaden it to maybe they have the option to talk with a coach they're familiar with. Maybe they have the option to have this 10-minute meeting with their advisor who they're already associated with. So I guess to give you a clear-cut answer, it's hard to do. I'd say I just feel like there's a lot more that comes to talking to the counselors than just being comfortable with someone. Like, as I said, some people might not need counseling. They might not need to talk as much as someone else does, but the other benefits that come along with it, such as having the information how to help a friend, is something that you wouldn't get by necessarily talking with an advisor or with a coach necessarily. So I think the additional benefits are something that would sway me to side more with the counselors, but I definitely see how, talking with the advisors, the coaches has, just as much power, especially with a young student here at Wabash.
Dr. Durden.
So my question for you and maybe Joey, so it's interesting because it seems like the two of you are actually talking about problems that perhaps are conflicting, right? And so I guess, Dalton, if we were to put in this money, would students, to Joey's point, actually use the facility? And the reason why I'm asking is I'm thinking about like the Martindale reno, the bottom floor is beautiful, right? Like it's a great social space, it could be a co-working space, and every time I walk to Fine Arts, no one's ever there. They're just not using it. And so I guess what guarantees do you have, or why do you think that the union would be different? Yeah, so I think, like me personally, like it doesn't happen often, but like when I do go to the library, like normally when I go there, it's with other students, and we're trying to find like kind of like that co-working space, like somewhere we can sit together, like talk quietly and get stuff done. And like I know I hear students all the time say like, oh, like I have my spot. And like those are the students that go there like every day, they like their quiet spot, they're gonna go alone. But if you ever try and go there with a group of students, you spend 10 minutes walking around trying to find a spot, and half the time you just end up back at the brew because there is nothing. And studying in the brew and talking about a project, like there's not that much space there. It, like, to me, like, it's not as, like, I don't want to use the word formal, but like it's just like it's a coffee shop essentially. And so like giving you that specific space to where like you can go, you have those whiteboards to collaborate, there's more options. And then I also think like having the food options, having a place to relax, like if you're there with a group and you're studying for a couple hours for an exam or something, like you have the opportunity to just walk downstairs and take a 15-minute break to watch TV. Whereas if you're in the library, like you're just like cramming stuff in because you have no other option. And I just, like I hear students say all the time, like we need more like co-working space. Like CIB students say like, oh, I love Fusion, but like I wish it was on campus. And so I think just like hearing students talk and kind of my participation with Sasaki, like going back to the fraternities and talking with other students, like it's something that the students actually do want and that we do talk about.
Yes.
On that point though, I mean, how are students going to have a co-working space or a quiet space within student union if they're having to compete with some of the other things that you're talking about putting in there, like the sound of ping pong balls and people crinkling Chick-fil-A wrappers and everything else going on that you want to include?
I mean, nobody's stopping it from being one floor. Like it could easily be like 2 or 3 different floors. So like you could have like the main floor with like your Chick-fil-A, Wally's, something like that. A hangout area, and then the upstairs is like your co-working space with a couple of offices, and then like if you want to add a 3rd floor for more co-working space, more offices, like that kind of like separates you from that kind of noise and the kind of social atmosphere that Wally's and a dining area would add.
Okay, so it's redoing all its parts, not just the 1st floor.
Yeah.
Thank you, audience, for your participation, but as you can see, our judges have returned.
No worries.
Fruitful Q&A session. Thank you again. So at this time, Dean Feller, Ms. Cooks, and Dean Welsh, welcome back, and we await your decision.
So on behalf of the judges, I want to say thank you to all the contestants and for the audience to coming out to support them tonight. It was a very difficult decision, and we went round and round with this. But I'll just go through our rankings of our 4 speakers. So in 4th place is Dalton Vachon. And I'd like to welcome him up to get his book and thank him for really giving us a lot to think about how we collaborate at Wabash College and how the spaces that we have can influence the way that we do that. Thank you very much. In 3rd, I'd like to invite Benjamin Manahan up to the stage. The judges were very impressed that you tackled an important topic, a difficult topic, about how do we address the stigma of mental health. It was both timely and important, and we really appreciate your bringing us to stage. And in 2nd place, I'd like to ask Ian Gale to come up onto the stage. Ian addressed a related issue as well about how do we deal with grief, how do we process grief, how do we move forward. We very much appreciate everything you told us about. Finally, then, I'd like to ask Joey Lenkey to come up, our 1st place. asking us the good question, how do we measure social interactions? How do we measure the things that are fundamentally important to our institution, but things that we don't always think of as measurables? And so it was very thought-provoking, and we appreciate that you brought in experiences that you've had both on and off campus, and ways that made us, I think everyone in the room, think a little bit about ways that we move forward to make Wabash better. So thank you for all of you. Thank you, of course, to the Rhetoric Department for organizing this fantastic event, and I really do appreciate all the work that went into it.
Congratulations, gentlemen. Once again, I want to thank you all for coming out, as well as our judges, Dean Feller, Ms. Cooks, and Dean Welch. And again, thank you for attending the 145th Baldwin Oratorical Contest. There is a reception. There will be a reception in the hotel lobby, and we hope to see you again next year. Thank you.